All right, so we are looking at that passage where we stopped last time, and at the syntactical differences that are there and what effect they might have. So who has something to share, either that you came up with or that your partner came up with that you think's worthy of mentioning? JT? All right. So that's a content comment, which is fine, but their routine is broken by death, which is, in that case, you're looking at what exactly happened, and every now and then there's somebody in that line of people, those 60 people back there, that drops out.
Yeah, and what he said, he noticed that it moves, it's fast reading until it goes to the part where it says now, and then the carrier dead in harness.
Yeah,
that slows down.
Kind of like the people marching. All they do is camp, just try to camp and march, and that keeps going until someone dies. Then the pace of the book, the writing itself slows down.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about the syntax, how the actual structure is a rapid pace until there's a death, and then the sentences lengthen. Okay, there's not actually real sentences in there. It's just descriptions. Yeah, good observation. Another one.
That was actually our observation.
Oh, was it?
Just to put a phrase on it, there was like parallelism with the way that it was written, just different words. It talks a lot about sounds, which is another sensory image that makes you feel like you're actually there, you can hear all this happening. And it also kind of reminds me of like how they have military funerals. It's a lot like that. That's where I thought of that.
Yeah, okay. Good. Other observations? Nobody talked about the line camp, cook, sleep, any of that? What'd you say about it? It does feel like the march. It is repetitive. It is that single syllabic or monosyllabic approach to writing, and that would be a good way to refer to it. It is just like a march. Camp, cook, sleep. It feels the drudgery of it. You feel that in this passage. You can sense the exhaustion in this repetitive motion that is just step after step. Remember, he has just said that it would not be surprising. He said, right above that, he said, if a lot of people just started armed with weapons to traveling the road between Deal and Gravesend, catching everybody and putting them to work as in slave labor, I would imagine that all the houses would get pretty empty too. You think about that in your neighborhood. If all of a sudden the word was out that anybody who's out on the street or leaves their houses is going to be captured and put into a labor camp, how fast would it be before your family left that neighborhood and everybody else left the neighborhood? That's what he said. You know, this is an empty march. They're not passing by things that can, where they can stop and talk to people or see things. He said the only difference is that they took their houses with them. So it's not like they left the houses along like your neighborhood would be. They took them with them because they are that kind of nomadic people. So it's an empty, lonely, difficult trip. How long is the trip? 200 miles. That is a long journey that they have to go. What about those drums? Anybody talk about the drums?
We talked about how like the drums and the bells are sort of like they go together in the way that like bells, like in a Christian church, usually represented death, and so the fact that they heard the drums, they thought that would also reflect on the death.
It could definitely reflect, death. Church bells also toll for bringing people in, but there's a similar kind of thing. It's still entombing in a sense. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, JT.
I think the drums and the bells, they represent the darkness growing around them, and then as the bells and the drums, I think they'll keep using them. It bringing them back in the future, and then they'll get louder and louder, and as they get louder, the darkness, the metaphorical darkness will be growing.
That'll be something good to watch. Absolutely. All right, well, you know the rule here. I'm not going to stop it unless I see red out there. Change that one for me that's over, it's already that way. So all you have to do is make the red on top, which tells me stop. Otherwise, I will just let it go. You should be making notes and things along, and I hope that you are definitely rereading after class, because you should find, thanks Josh, you should find a lot of enlightenment in doing that. After we go through stuff, your homework is always to reread what we read in class and then add to your reader response journal. When you do that, you should see so much more than even we stopped and talked about in class. Are you doing that? And is it helping? Are you seeing those things? Good. Okay, here we go.
Once a white man in an unbuttoned...
Sorry, for some reason I've not got the speaker attached.
Connected to Carol Jackson's iPhone.
Okay, now we're attached.
uniform camping on the path with an armed escort of lank Zanzibaris, very hospitable and festive, not to say drunk. Was looking after the upkeep of the road, he declared. Can't say I saw any road or any upkeep, unless the body of a middle-aged Negro with a bullet hole in the forehead, upon which I absolutely stumbled 3 miles further on, may be considered as a permanent improvement. I had a white companion, too. Not a bad chap, but rather too fleshy, and with the exasperating habit of fainting on the hot hillsides, miles away from the least bit of shade and water. Annoying, you know, to hold your own coat like a parasol over a man's head while he's coming to. I couldn't help asking him once what he meant by coming there at all. To make money, of course. What do you think? He said scornfully. Then he got fever and had to be carried in a hammock slung under a pole. As he weighed 16 stone, I had no end of rows with the carriers. They jibbed, ran away, sneaked off with their loads in the night. Quite a mutiny. So one evening I made a speech in English with gestures, not one of which was lost to the 60 pairs of eyes before me. And the next morning I started the hammock off in front all right. An hour afterwards I came upon the whole concern wrecked in a bush. Man, hammock, groans, blankets, horrors. The heavy pole had skinned his poor nose. He was very anxious for me to kill somebody, but there wasn't the shadow of a carrier near. I remembered the old doctor. It would be interesting for science to watch the mental changes of individuals on the spot. I felt I was becoming scientifically interesting. However, all that is to no purpose. On the 15th day, I came in sight of the big river again and hobbled into the central station. It was on a backwater surrounded by scrub and forest, with a pretty border of smelly mud on one side, and on the 3 others enclosed by a crazy fence of rushes. A neglected gap was all the gate it had, and the first glance at the place was enough to let you see the flabby devil was running that show. White men with long staves in their hands appeared languidly from amongst the buildings, strolling up to take a look at me, and then retired out of sight somewhere. One of them, a stout, excitable chap with black moustache.
Okay, I can't see Krista's, so you need to, like, maybe, there you go. Well, but now I can't see Haley's. Move it over to the side, there we go. Sorry, yeah.
Well, mostly I just felt as though we'd gone too far without stopping, so.
Okay, so what do you want to talk about?
I guess I sort of wanted to talk about the man that got sick, and I sort of thought that, like, it was, like, his greed was making him sick, and then,
How's he described?
well, he's sort of described as, like, being weak and, like, sort of, like, he can't really adjust to his surroundings, and yet he's still really determined just to, like, exploit it all and get the money, because in his opinion that'll make it worth it, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't make any excuses for why he's there either. I mean, it's just like to make money, of course. I mean, why else would you be here? It's not like I've got the big purpose, I'm, bringing the light or any of those things. I mean, Why else? Of course I'm here. It would be like asking a gold miner in San Francisco in the 1800s, why are you here? You know, I'm not here to change the world. I'm here to pan for gold and make money. That, to him, it was that obvious. But was he well suited to the place?
Not at all. He ended up being more of like a burden than an asset, like in many ways.
Yeah.
I think it's another instance that kind of sets Marlowe apart from the other people there because he describes him as annoying and just, he wasn't really welcomed at all. The other man, and it just kind of shows how his opinions differ from other white men who might take like pity on him or feel bad that he was put in this unfair situation, and Marlowe doesn't really think that way.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, it really shows how Marlowe, he's there because he was really interested in, he was always captivated by, you know, the dark spots on the map, so to say, and he's really there for a purpose. And he talked about that near the beginning of the book, how the ideas and all that, it kind of shows that people really don't ever fight for ideas. It's really just kind of greed that you see these people are there, and he's really the only person who went there not really trying to just make a profit. He kind of went there with a purpose and a reason.
Yeah.
And
you know, we're going to see, we know that we're going to get the message through him. So those puzzle pieces should begin falling into place. Casey?
The phrase flabby devil seemed familiar, so I searched it, and he actually been indirectly mentioned like about 14 pages previously, and it started out with, I've seen the devil of violence, the devil of greed, and the devil of hot desire. And like later on it says, when it mentions it, I would become acquainted with the flabby, pretending, weak-eyed devil of over-patience and pitiless folly. So I feel like the character, kind of embodies all that is wrong with the endeavor that's going on in that country.
Yeah, I think that's very astute, very good, close reading. What else did we pass that is worthy of note? I saw a couple of people look up, like, maybe should I put my red cup
I
out?
felt I was becoming
Yeah.
interested.
That was, as Caroline, I saw go, like, is anybody else going to put, yes. Yeah, I know. I saw that on your face, Caroline. You just didn't, but then it went past and you thought, okay, well, I missed my moment. Was that it?
Yeah.
So, why on that?
I just thought that that's been one of the main things that we've been talking about, how people lose their sense, or the doctor is saying how people lose their mind, and we've been talking about the sun and everything that we've been referencing to that, and then he directly says, I felt I was becoming scientifically interesting about everything, I don't know.
Which means that what's happening to him? He's changing. You know, we don't know in what regard, but he's definitely changing. That his mental state is shifting. I don't know that we can say at this point in what direction, in, out, up, down, or whatever we want to say, but he at least is saying something's happening in there. And I think I would be interesting to see. And we know he, as Casey said, he's different. And we've got, or Taylor said that he's different, and that's been established. So, you know, how he's different, and even now as he's changing, how is that going to be even more different from that? Yeah, those are all very good things to point out. Are you familiar with the British measurement system where they talk about stone? It was really interesting. I was in England for a while one summer, and even listening to it on the news, they would say, you know, something weighed 11 stone or weighed 16 stone. They still talk like that. They still use that. Look it up and see what stone means. I think a stone is like 14 pounds, something like that. Yeah. So they talk about people's weight in stone, which is really interesting, you know.
They still do.
Well, it's very archaic sounding, isn't it? Because, you know, that would be an ancient type of measurement. You know, you have a uniform stone, and that's how much that stone weighs, and you take 14 of those, and that's But yeah, they still do that. They use others as well. But I found it interesting they did. All right, are we ready to take off?
Wait.
Yes.
Oh, I saw it says he was very anxious for me to kill somebody, but there wasn't the shadow of a carrier near. That kind of like threw me off guard. Like I guess I was kind of confused by that.
Why was he anxious for him to kill somebody? To find blame, to make somebody pay, and that would have been a sort of a very obvious disregard for that life. That it is just, somebody needs to pay for this misery. You need to just kill somebody, instead of valuing every life and saying, it does show this very sort of corporate disregard for life.
So kind of like trying to put blame on someone.
Mm-hmm. Like that would make any difference, really. Okay.
She's informed me of the great volubility and many digressions as soon as I told him who I was, that my steamer was at the bottom of the river. I was thunderstruck. What? How? Why? Oh, it was all right. The manager himself was there. All quite correct. Everybody had behaved splendidly. You must, he said in agitation, go and see the general manager at once. He is waiting. I did not see the real significance of that wreck at once. I fancy I see it now, but I'm not sure. Not at all. Certainly the affair was too stupid when I think of it to be altogether natural. Still. But at the moment it presented itself simply as a confounded nuisance. The steamer was sunk. They had started 2 days before in a sudden hurry up the river with a manager on board in charge of some volunteer skipper, and before they had been out 3 hours they tore the bottom out of her on stones and she sank near the south bank. I asked myself what I was to do there now my boat was lost. As a matter of fact, I had plenty to do in fishing my command out of the river. I had to set about it the very next day. That and the repairs when I brought the pieces to the station.
That's good. I'm glad Krista is stopping us. Okay, talk.
Okay, well, so I sort of wanted to talk about the fact that he assumed later on that looking back that his boat had been sabotaged in some way. So that shows some, like, I don't know.
I don't think that's the word, but I guess I can see sabotage, but to be altogether natural seems that it's not of the world, it's like supernatural fate.
I was going with more, it said something, it was far too stupid. So it's like, these people are supposed to be professionals and something else went wrong.
But I mean, I wouldn't say it's a deliberate sabotage. It's just
And that this is something he's pondering on board the Nellie. So we can't forget that the whole time this is taking place here, he's telling the story sitting on the deck of the Nellie. And as he's telling it, he's just like when you tell a story and you get to a point and you think, I wonder if, I hadn't thought about that, but I wonder if that happened. So these thoughts sort of interject in his own storytelling. But he is, it's very stupid, actually, ironic. He gets, after this long journey we just talked about, he gets there and discovers that his boat that he's going to captain is at the bottom of the river. And the response that he was given when he asked about it, let's look back at that. That response, it's all right. The manager himself was there. It's all quite correct. Everybody had behaved splendidly. Do you find anything interesting about that response?
Personally, I just felt as though I had 2 exclamation points.
Do you remember the vocabulary word vapid? Sort of fits here, doesn't it? Like that this person is more concerned with the behavior of the individuals when the boat sank than the fact that the boat is actually at the bottom of the river. Everybody was fine. Everybody behaved fine. They took care of everything to go see the general manager. You got to go see the general manager at once. Not, oh my gosh, your boat. What are you going to do? Because at this point, he is a man without a mission. Well, he's got the mission, but he has no boat. It's not like, and the way that was described to him that it did sink also seemed stupid. Yeah, very much so. And it was in that next paragraph where he's thinking back on it, and he's going, when I think of it, it just seemed, I'm not sure, but I'm not sure, not at all. Certainly the affair was too stupid when I think of it. Notice he's separating that by dashes, which gives that interruption of thought, which syntactically indicates this pondering and processing of thought, to be altogether natural still. See that ellipsis, the ... is an ellipsis. That's the same kind of effect syntactically to provide that type of punctuation. And he even interrupts that. But at the moment, it presented itself simply as a confounded nuisance. So he stops his own retrospective thought on that to continue with his story. But at the moment, it presented itself simply as a confounded nuisance. It does let you know, though, that he thinks about that as to, wonder what was up with that. The deal was the steamer had sunk. And I've just got to figure out now what to do next. Okay, let's see what he does.
Took some months. My first interview with the manager was curious. He did not ask me to sit down after my 20-mile walk that morning. He was commonplace in complexion, in feature, in manner, and in voice. He was of middle size and of ordinary build. His eyes, of the usual blue, were perhaps remarkably cold, and he certainly could make his glance fall on one as trenchant and heavy as an axe. But even at these times, the rest of his person seemed to disclaim the intention. Otherwise, there was only an indefinable, faint expression of his lips, something stealthy. A smile, not a smile, I remember it, but I can't explain. It was unconscious, this smile was, though just after he had said something, it got intensified for an instant. It came at the end of his speeches like a seal applied on the words to make the meaning of the commonest phrase appear absolutely inscrutable. He was a common trader from his youth up, employed in these parts, nothing more. He was obeyed, yet he inspired neither love nor fear nor even respect. He inspired uneasiness. That was it, uneasiness, not a definite mistrust, just uneasiness, nothing more. You have no idea how effective such a faculty can be. He had no genius for organizing, for initiative, or for order even. That was evident in such things as the deplorable state of the station. He had no learning and no intelligence. His position had come to him, why, perhaps because he was never ill. He had served 3 terms of 3 years out there, because triumphant health in the general rout of constitutions is a kind of power in itself. When he went home on leave, he rioted on a large scale, pompously, Jack ashore, with a difference in externals only. This one could gather from his casual talk. He originated nothing, he could keep the routine going, that's all. But he was great. He was great by this little thing, that it was impossible to tell what could control such a man. He never gave that secret away. Perhaps there was nothing within him. Such a suspicion made one pause, for out there were no external checks. Once, when various tropical diseases had laid low almost every agent in the station, he was heard to say, "Men who come out here should have no entrails." He sealed the utterance with that smile of his, as though it had been a door opening into a darkness he had in his keeping. You fancied you had seen things, but the seal was on. When annoyed at mealtimes by the constant quarrels of the white men about precedence, he ordered an immense round table to be made, for which a special house had to be built. This was the station's mess room. Where he sat was the first place, the rest were nowhere. One felt this to be his unalterable conviction. He was neither civil nor uncivil.
Yes, Casey.
Just the way you describe this character, it seems like there's a very, very unnatural emptiness to him. Like, there's absolutely absolutely no substance. He never gets sick. His eyes are like very blue. And it's kind of like it's not like a vapid smile. It's like a creepy smile.
It's a creepy smile. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just kind of
Yeah.
He uses the word common so much, commonplace, and but then he bashes him so much, and then he says, but he was great.
Yes. So were you expecting that?
No.
No, you weren't. Let's look at the way he uses the word seal several times too, and he uses it in reference to that smile. So look back at the section where he's talking, where it says he was great. But he was great. He was great by this little thing that it was impossible to tell what could control such a man. He never gave the secret away. Perhaps there was nothing within him. Such a suspicion made one pause, for out there were no external checks. Skip over, he was heard to say, men who come out here should have no entrails. He sealed the utterance with that smile of his, as though it had been a door opening into a darkness he had in his keeping. You fancied you had seen things, but the seal was on. Isn't that creepy? He has that sort of smile that you just don't know. I fancy that there's some type of eye glimmer with it. But it goes fast. What does he inspire, does Marlowe say? Uneasiness. Yeah. Do you ever be around people that just make you uneasy? Just uneasy. No loyalty, no fear, just uneasy. Something's just not right there.
because he's so empty, you can't destroy him. That kind of parallels like how the colonists, like they didn't create anything, they just destroyed everything.
Yeah. But he does say in this passage, it's like you saw something, like there was darkness within, but he sealed it back up. What might he be saying about this man? If there's darkness within him, but he sealed it back, and that's what made him great. That he didn't let you in. He, aren't some of the craziest people, the scariest people, look awfully normal? Like you go back to any, whether it's a serial killer or a school shooter, and what do they say? They interview the people around, and they all said, he just seemed like a normal guy, just seemed like a normal, but this guy has a little bit of a, it's like he lets it, but then he seals it back up. You can see it, and then it's sealed.
It was interesting to see also what gave people power.
What gave them the power?
They were just healthy.
If you were healthy, yeah. How long had this guy been out there? 3 times 3. He'd been out there 3 terms. So they're it's like a tour of duty. It was 3 years at a time, and then you had to sort of re-up or be reapproved. And he's been out there 3 cycles of that. 9 years. That's a long time to be out there. Maybe he had that little darkness in him when he went out there, and maybe he didn't. But he's able to survive. Now, we talked about the guy with the pin holder in his ear and talked about how he manipulated the environment to suit him, and that was a survival skill in an environment like that. And maybe could this guy have this the same way? If you are able, as the doctor said, stay calm. If you're able to control your environment, isn't that a way to keep yourself calm? He's successful, and Marlowe says he did a good job of it. He's great. He is odd, no doubt about it, but he is great.
He was quiet.
Oops, go ahead.
Of the round table thing, I thought it was like an allusion to like Camelot and King Arthur and all that stuff. And how the fact like he was the only one with any power, everyone else was nothing, but he was always in charge.
Yes, and you can see that with that creation, the fact that he could get the table created, and then he played where he sat was the first chair. Wherever he sat was there was no head of the table, So by the nature that he sat there, that's where the head was. And then everybody else just got around. But it was a problem-solving thing, which contributes to that. He was great. He was good at what he did. You know, you've got to keep the calm. And if people were sort of dissolving into petty arguments and that kind of stuff of who was going to sit where, well, there's a problem solving. Let's just get a round table, and then there is no issue about it. So he was effective at what he did. And that's what Marlowe's admiration is really mired in there. Okay.
He allowed his boy, an overfed young native from the coast, to treat the white men under his very eyes with provoking insolence. He began to speak as soon as he saw me. I had been very long on the road. He could not wait, had to start without me. The upriver stations had to be relieved. There had been so many delays already that he did not know who was dead and who was alive and how they got on, and so on and so on. He paid no attention to my explanations, and playing with a stick of sealing wax, repeated several times that the situation was very grave, very grave. There were rumors that a very important station was in jeopardy, and its chief, Mr. Kurtz, was ill. Hoped it was not true. Mr. Kurtz was... I felt weary and irritable. Hang Kurtz, I thought. I interrupted him by saying I had heard of Mr. Kurtz on the coast. Ah, so they talk of him down there, he murmured to himself. Then he began again, assuring me Mr. Kurtz was the best agent he had, an exceptional man of the greatest importance to the company. Therefore, I could understand his anxiety. He was, he said, very, very uneasy. Certainly, he fidgeted on his chair a good deal, exclaimed, "Oh, Mr. Kurtz," broke the stick of sealing wax, and seemed dumbfounded by the accident. Next thing he wanted to know how long it would take to... I interrupted him again, being hungry, you know, and kept on my feet, too. I was getting savage. How could I tell? I said. I hadn't even seen the wreck yet. Some months, no doubt. All this talk seemed to me so futile. Some months, he said. Well, let us say 3 months before we can make a start. Yes, that ought to do the affair. I flung out of his hut. He lived all alone in a clay hut with a sort of veranda, muttering to myself my opinion of him. He was a chattering idiot. Afterwards I took it back when it was borne upon me startlingly with what extreme nicety he had estimated the time requisite for the affair.
Hey.
When you started talking about Kurtz and how he was the best agent and excellent man, we have to look and see how that man, what Marlowe's going to believe as an excellent man, and what the guy who
station manager, that's going to be completely different, because the fact that Marlowe is coming in and he has that purpose, and he kind of has morals and values. Yet these people, they're only there for profit. They're governed by greed. So he's kind of have to question whether or not, when we see Mr. Kurtz, whether or not he's actually going to be, by Marlowe's standard, an excellent person, or if he's going to be, the opposite. He's going to be. So there could be different definitions of what an excellent person is. The company standards, Marlowe's standards, as to how great he actually is. He's still, surrounded by that mystery, which of course, intrigues Marlowe. And by turn, intrigues you. Right?
I thought it was interesting that he was playing with some sealing wax, and then as soon as he broke the sealing wax, he started to get emotional, and that was when he was talking about Mr. Kurtz.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was surprised about the sealing wax. And, there's, when you have in a piece of literature something that breaks, that's always, look at that as something symbolic, that something is broken. I mean, there's right in front of you, he's giving you something broken. And he is talking then about Mr. Kurtz. So all of that should give you some foreshadowing and some hints. We've already had some indications of that he is ill. Y'all are making some really good comments. Did you notice his use of the word savage? He says, I was becoming savage. And he's just talking about being hungry and tired, but he used the word savage. And that really just takes it down to the bottom of existence. If you know about Maslow's hierarchy, the lowest level of that is the need to be filled with hunger and have your basic needs met. And that's where he is at that point. He uses the word futile. And we've talked about the futility of the things that we've seen, that whether it's the firing of the man of war into the bush or all of those things, we see the repetition of that concept.
I went to work the next day, turning, so to speak, my back on that station. In that way only, it seemed to me, I could keep my hold on the redeeming facts of life. Still, one must look about sometimes, and then I saw this station, these men strolling aimlessly about in the sunshine of the yard. I asked myself sometimes what it all meant. They wandered here and there with their absurd long staves in their hands like a lot of faithless pilgrims bewitched inside a rotten fence. The word ivory rang in the air, was whispered, was sighed. You would think they were praying to it. A taint of imbecile rapacity blew through it all, like a whiff from some corpse. By Jove, I've never seen anything so unreal in my life. And outside, the silent wilderness surrounding this cleared speck on the earth struck me as something great and invincible, like evil or truth, waiting patiently for the passing away of this fantastic invasion. Oh, these months.
Yes!
I think that the passage where it starts with still, it says still one must look about sometimes, and where it ends at fantastic invasion. I think that's like the main part of his theme and what we've been talking about with firing to the bush. And they said they walked around aimlessly and like whispered ivory, and so it's focusing a lot on the pointlessness of all this greed and rapacity. And
Yeah.
It says rapacity.
Yeah, he does. That sentence where it is. Read that sentence.
It says, a taint of impeccable rapacity blew through it all like a whiff from some corpse.
Yeah, imbecile. A taint of imbecile rapacity. What does rapacity mean? Remember that? Excessive greed. What's imbecile? Like stupid on a very low level. Very, very low level. Childlike, almost, infantile. So it is this, you would think they were praying, like ivory is the god here. And it is a childlike greed. It is when a little child is just, I want, it is a pure form of selfishness. There's no consideration because a child has no ability to consider other feelings, other people, the implications of whether, what that's going to do. It's just the purest form of I want. And so that's what he's saying. It's imbecile rapacity. That's just a very sophisticated way of saying that. And he says it's a taint of imbecile rapacity blew through it all. Look at this. Look at this simile right here. Like a whiff from some corpse. Stinks. There's a stench. There was a vocab word that would be good here too. Remember that word? What was it? Fetid. Yeah, fetid. That's a good. So it was rotten and it smelled like that. This worshiping of the ivory. It just feels. Do you feel it? He's wanting you to feel it. And when he gives you that whiff from a corpse, that's a strong sensory image, isn't it? An olfactory image. Do you know the different types of imagery? So that one you should almost recoil. He wants you to recoil. He wants you to feel that this whole thing that just seems to be obsessing all these people here to him is feeling very wrong. Good stop.
Well, never mind. Various things happened. One evening, a grass shed full of calico, cotton prints, beads, and I don't know what else burst into a blaze so suddenly that you would have thought the earth had opened to let an avenging fire consume all that trash. I was smoking my pipe quietly by my dismantled steamer and saw them all cutting capers in the light with their arms lifted high when the stout man with moustaches came tearing down to the river, a tin pail in his hand, assured me that everybody was behaving splendidly, dipped about a quart of water and tore back again. I noticed there was a hole in the bottom of his pail. I strolled up. There was no hurry. You see, the thing had gone off like a box of matches. It had been hopeless from the very first.
Taylor!
And the whole thing with, I noticed when it's like an avenging fire that consumed all the trash, it's like Congo's fighting back because they want all this stuff, and then...
Because what's in the building that got caught on fire?
Yeah.
What's in there? Look and see. What's in the building that caught on fire?
All the stuff that the Europeans are sort of providing. It's
Yeah.
useless things that are not in any way necessity.
Yeah.
And it just kind of also goes to show just how stupid the whole thing is. I mean, there's a hole in this pail. It's not really gonna do
Yes.
anything.
Yes. So he's trying to put out the fire with a pail of water with a hole in the bottom of the pail, which is an echo of the blasting the mountain away to build a railroad that's not in the way with the rusty rails and yards. It's this constant futility of it all. That this is, remember the line from Poisonwood Bible, this forest eats itself and stays alive forever. It's just a fire that will never be put out. There's going to be a hole in the bottom of the bucket. Regardless, it will never end. Okay, that's a good stop.
The flame had leaped high, driven everybody back, lighted up everything, and collapsed. The shed was already a heap of embers, glowing fiercely. A native was being beaten nearby. They said he had caused the fire in some way. Be that as it may, he was screeching most horribly. I saw him later on for several days sitting in a bit of shade, looking very sick and trying to recover himself. Afterwards he arose and went out, and the wilderness without a sound took him into its bosom again. As I approached the glow from the dark, I found myself at the back of two men talking. I heard the name of Kurtz pronounced, then the words, "Take advantage of this unfortunate accident." One of the men was the manager. I wished him a good evening. "Did you ever see anything like it, eh? It is incredible," he said, and walked off. The other man remained. He was a first-class agent, young, gentlemanly, a bit reserved, with a forked little beard and a hooked nose. He was standoffish with the other agents, and they on their side said he was the manager's spy upon them. As to me, I had hardly ever spoken to him before. We got into talk, and by we strolled away from the hissing ruins. Then he asked me to his room, which was in the main building of the station. He struck a match, and I perceived that this young aristocrat had not only a silver-mounted dressing case, but also a whole candle all to himself. Just at that time, the manager was the only man supposed to have any right to candles. Native mats covered the clay walls. A collection of spears, assegais, shields, knives was hung up in trophies. The business entrusted to this fellow was the making of bricks, so I had been informed. But there wasn't a fragment of brick anywhere in the station, and he had been there more than a year, waiting. It seems he could not make bricks without something, I don't know what, straw, maybe. Anyway, it could not be found there, and as it was not likely to be sent from Europe, it did not appear clear to me what he was waiting for. An act of special creation, perhaps. However, they were all waiting, all the 16 or 20 pilgrims of them, for something. And upon my word, it did not seem an uncongenial occupation from the way they took it, though the only thing that ever came to them was disease, as far as I could see. They beguiled the time by backbiting and intriguing against each other in a foolish kind of way. There was an air of plotting about that station, but nothing came of it, of course. It was as unreal as everything else, as the philanthropic pretense of the whole concern, as their talk, as their government, as their show of work.
Okay, so going back like a ways up to the top, well, if you're in the book, it's page 28. But it says it seems he cannot make bricks without something. I don't know what, straw maybe. And in the footnotes it says basically that's an impossible act to make bricks without straws. And so I'm kind of confused about the point that he's trying to make there. Is it just like they were saying with pail with a hole in the bottom? Is it the same thing? This is all just really pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
These are impossible tasks that can't get done, but yet they're being charged with doing them. And so instead of saying, well, we can't do this, let's find another solution, well, we'll just wait. And we'll just wait. And these things will just bide our time. We'll just wait.
He's been there a year and they haven't done anything.
Yes, and we don't even know what the bricks would be for. Presumably to build either some structure at the station, but there are certainly materials that are native to that area of Africa that the natives themselves would build structures with that they could have helped with, like Mama Tataba in the garden. But they're not asking. They don't want to know. They're just going to wait for whatever it is they need to make the bricks. Anything else while we're stopped?
I thought this description was kind of funny because he had the forked beard, which is like kind of a devilish, and then a hook nose, and he was a spy with a snake. So it's a very like oily, like a subversive type of person.
Yeah. He's also wealthy. I mean, or he's either misappropriated things or he comes in from a position of privilege. So he either has, he brought provisions with him and he doesn't care what the rules are because the rules say that only the manager can have a whole candle. And he just flaunts that. He doesn't really care. I mean, he doesn't know Marlowe. Marlowe's a new guy there. And he just goes ahead and lights that candle.
The only real feeling was a desire to get appointed to a trading post where ivory was to be had so that they could earn percentages. They intrigued and slandered and hated each other only on that account. But as to effectually lifting a finger, oh no, by heavens. There is something, after all, in the world allowing one man to steal a horse while another must not look at a halter. Steal a horse straight out, very well, he has done it, perhaps he can ride. But there is a way of looking at a halter that would provoke the most charitable of saints into a kick. I had no idea why he wanted to be so sociable, but as we chatted in there, it suddenly occurred to me the fellow was trying to get at something. In fact, pumping me. He alluded constantly to Europe, to the people I was supposed to know there, putting leading questions as to my acquaintances in the sepulchral city and so on. His little eyes glittered like mica discs with curiosity, though he tried to keep up a bit of superciliousness. At first I was astonished, but very soon I became also awfully curious to see what he would find out from me. I couldn't possibly imagine what I had in me to make it worth his while. It was very pretty to see how he baffled himself, for in truth my body was full of chills and my head had nothing in it but that wretched steamboat business. It was evident he took me for a perfectly shameless prevaricator. At last he got angry, and to conceal a movement of furious annoyance, he yawned. I rose. Then I noticed a small sketch in oils on a panel representing a woman draped and blindfolded, carrying a lighted torch. The background was somber, almost black. The movement of the woman was stately, and the effect of the torchlight on the face was sinister. It arrested me. And he stood by, civilly holding an empty half-pint champagne bottle, medical comforts, with the candle stuck in it. To my question, he said, Mr. Kurtz had painted this, in this very station, more than a year ago, while waiting for means to go to his trading post. Tell me, pray, said I, who is this Mr. Kurtz? The chief of the inner station, he answered in a short tone, looking away.
By the way, I'm going to let it
Much
run
obliged,
to the bell,
I said,
regardless
laughing.
of cups.
And you are the brickmaker of the central station. Everyone knows that. He was silent for a while. He is a prodigy, he said at last. He is an emissary of pity and science and progress and devil knows what else. We want, he began to declaim suddenly, for the guidance of the cause entrusted to us by Europe, so to speak, higher intelligence, wide sympathies, a singleness of purpose. Who says that? I asked. Lots of them, he replied. Some even write that, and so he comes here, a special being, as you ought to know. Well, why ought I to know? I interrupted, really surprised. He paid no attention. Yes.
Don't forget the vocabulary test on Tuesday, vocab 13. And that you do not have school on Monday thanks to us not having any snow days. So enjoy your day off.
Oh yeah.